Sitting here behind me are two of the cheapest Tesla models in their lineup, the Tesla Model 3 and the Tesla Model Y. Now, we found out last week that they share about 75% of the same components, but there are some key differences. So this time on Eat Sleep Drive, we're going to dive deep and find out just exactly what those differences are. Welcome everyone to another episode of Eat Sleep Drive. I'm very excited to have the Tesla Model Y here, which is Tesla's latest model. You may have seen last week I did a video review of this car specifically, and what we found out was that these cars, this is the Tesla Model 3, share about 75% of the same components, so they are in many ways very similar, but there are some unique differences, and I wanted to get them side by side so I can show you exactly the differences between each. First of all, huge thank you to my friend Aaron, who rents a bunch of Teslas on Turo. And he's actually running a promotion through the end of May. If you DM him on Instagram and mention this video, you can rent a Tesla Model Y Performance for only $99. There's a link in the description below. But let's dive into these vehicles. Now, the first big thing obviously you're going to notice between these two cars is that one is a SUV and one is a sedan. This one, specifically the Model Y, is what they refer to as the CUV, or a crossover SUV. So subsequently, it has a rear hatch, which is powered on this car. And that's something that's different on the Model 3. The rear trunk is not powered, so you can put it up and down by just pressing this button, which is a nice feature. But we'll bring it back up because I want to show you more things that are in the trunk. Now that we have the rear hatch open, we can see the ample cargo space in the back of the Tesla Model Y. This car has 68 cubic feet of cargo space compared to the 15 in the Model 3. So clearly a huge, significantly different amount of cargo room in this car. And there are some more pockets in this one. On the Tesla Model 3, there's only one pocket on the side here, you can see, and there's actually one on both sides on the Tesla Model Y. Now, the other big difference that you're gonna see is these two buttons back here, which put the seats down remotely, so you don't have to do it yourself. You just hit this button and the seat falls down. So the Tesla Model 3 does not have any ability to remotely release the seats. You have to do it yourself. Now, as I mentioned, in the Tesla Model 3, you can also put the rear seats down, but they are 60-40 splitting. In the Tesla Model Y, it's actually 3 different seats. So you can actually put this down, the center, I don't even know if I want to call it a seat because I'm not sure it's technically a seat, but you can have a pass-through here, which is something different than the Tesla Model 3. But you can essentially put each of these down individually. So 3 seats versus the 2 seats in the Tesla Model 3. The first thing that you notice when you get in the Model Y, in the back seat at least, is this incredible panoramic glass roof. It is different than the Model 3. The Model 3 has a sort of bar that goes across that will break up this area, whereas in the Model Y, it's just one big roof. So you don't really notice it that much in the front seat when you're driving because it's sort of like just beyond your field of vision above you. But when you sit in the back seat, it is really quite an interesting experience to just have this completely exposed glass roof. Now, it's not just the glass roof that makes this vehicle feel bigger in the rear seat. It is actually physically bigger in the rear seat back here. I have a little more than 1.5 inches more of headroom than the Model 3 and the Model Y. And the big difference here is the amount of legroom. There are 5 additional inches of legroom in the Model Y as opposed to the Model 3. So that's really the big advantage to the Model Y, is your rear occupants have so much more room, both height and leg room. There is one quick note though, the front seat, they did borrow an inch from the front seat. So you lose an inch of leg room in the front seat, but you gain 5 inches in the rear seat. So a bit of a trade-off there. While we're talking about the seats in the Model Y also recline in the rear, which is pretty nice. They go 2 settings back. Now I'm 6'1", I don't have any issues with headroom in the back here, but when I do put the seat all the way in the recline position, my head does hit this sort of protrusion right here. So it is something of note. So anyone 6 foot or under will be completely fine in the rear seat, but it is something to note. Two other things of note in the Model Y rear seat is first, the manual release of the rear doors. In the Model 3, you don't get that. There's a manual release in the front doors on both cars, but the Model Y is the only one that gets the manual release. What do I mean by that? There are traditionally actuators which open and close the door, and the problem with that is if the battery goes completely flat and it can't open, there's really no way to get the door open. So there's a manual release that you can do in the Model Y. So that's kind of a interesting difference. And then also you have 2 USB ports here. There's no climate controller or anything back here. There are vents for heating and cooling, which you can direct back here, but they're all controlled up front. But you do get these 2 USB Type-C ports in the back for charging whatever various needs your people in the back need. Moving on to the front seat of the Model Y, it's more or less the same as the Model 3. There are a couple differences though, but if you were to just be blindfolded and put in one or the other, it would be kind of hard to tell. The big difference here is the amount of headroom. There is a little bit more headroom in the Model Y as opposed to the Model 3. I already mentioned that you lose an inch of legroom in the front seat of the Model Y. That's to help with the rear legroom. But the seat, you'll notice here, is like mounted really high up, which I think is quite odd. These are the exact same seats from the Model 3, but they put it on this like big risers right here, which kind of looks crazy. But the big thing with CUVs is people really like to feel like they're sitting high up and they can kind of see everything and have a good view. So that is definitely a difference. In this car, you definitely feel like you're sitting higher up because you physically are sitting higher up because of these risers. While we're talking about visibility, the visibility is slightly limited in the Model Y just because of that rear sort of sportback configuration. It's quite a narrow rear window, and it is slightly different than if you were to drive the Model 3 and the Model Y back to back. The last difference in the front cabin is the addition of a wireless charging area right in this center stack here. So if your phone has the capability, you can plop it here and it will wirelessly charge it, which is quite a nice feature to have. A big difference that exists beneath the surface of these cars is that the Model Y comes with a heat pump. This is something the Model 3 does not come with. A heat pump fundamentally changes how the cabin and battery heating operates, and actually greatly improves the efficiency of these cars in colder weather. What does all that mean? It means if you live in a cold climate, you will see an improved range with the Model Y over the Model 3. As it's about time to sum these vehicles up, before we do, I want to make a quick note that the Tesla Model Y also gets a rear tow hook, which is something that's not present in the Model 3. The Model 3 only has a front tow hook, so you get both front and rear on the Model Y. A minor difference, but it is something that may come in handy if you ever need to tow the car. As far as driving impressions, you can check out both of my videos. I did a in-depth video for the Model 3 and the Model Y, so you can look back at those if you want to get into all the nitty-gritty, but they really drive very much the same. There is slightly more body roll in the Model Y, but despite the fact that this Model Y is 344 pounds heavier, it's really hard to tell, honestly. It is slightly slower 0 to 60 from like competing model to model, so the dual motor to dual motor. You can't beat physics. The weight will make this car slightly slower, but it's honestly really hard to tell. So as I mentioned last week in this review, I thought the Model Y was a great compromise of basically getting all the perks of the Model 3 with more storage. The big difference here is the 322-mile range on this car versus the 315-mile range on this car, or subsequent like dual motor to dual motor long range models. So you lose 7 miles of range going from the Model 3 to the Model Y, which is a pretty insignificant number in my book, but it is something worth mentioning. So slightly less efficient because of the heavier weight and of course a little bit more drag being it's a bigger vehicle. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below, what you think about the Model Y compared to the Model 3. I was pretty blown away when I drove the Model 3 initially, and I'm really impressed with Tesla's latest offering in the Model Y. CUVs are huge in America. The Honda CR-V and the RAV4 sold almost 1 million cars last year, so you can tell that they have a huge market for these here. Let me know once again in the comments below. I appreciate you guys watching as always. If you want to follow me in between episodes, check me out on Instagram at EatSleepDrive TV. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one.